So I told you last week, 3-part series, we're going to have impact transfer candidates. Who could be the most impactful transfer of 2022? I gave you what I thought were the obvious candidates. Now we are moving in to the slept-on candidates, okay? So let me roll through these right quick. Top of the list, Notre Dame safety Brandon Joseph, okay? I got to meet Brandon at the Big Ten Media Days last year when he was repping Northwestern. He's coming off of that year, where he was an All-American cornerback, right? Safety prospect, period, at a place that just put out Greg Newsome, among others. And now he is transferring to the spot where Kyle Hamilton was a monster. I suspect our man, your man, my man, Marcus, is going to have that man playing center field for the Fighting Irish. I'm very excited about this because they're going to go from having an actual pterodactyl and Kyle Hamilton, who's literally going from one hash mark to the sideline to pick people off, right, to another actual pterodactyl who's going from one hash mark to a sideline to pick people off. Brandon Joseph can play. Okay, next on the list, Florida State defensive end Jared Verse, who's stomping on people at Albany. I'm really excited to see him coming off the edge. We know what Jermaine Johnson was at Florida State. This is their heir apparent to that, okay? Next on the list, Washington State quarterback Cameron Ward. Cam's coming from Incarnate Word, where he was lighting people up. But again, another FCS to FBS transfer that I think is going to be pretty doggone good. Okay. Settle for a little bit on my man at Alabama. That would be Eli Ricks. Okay. I first met Eli when he was at the Star for the opening final in 2018. He was one of just a handful of underclassmen that were invited to this showcase for rising seniors. And he was already full grown at 6'2" then, just absolutely going at people. This is at a time when Spencer Rattler, Theo Weiss, Jaden Hazelwood, R.J. Henderson, and Jason McClellan were running things on a 7-on-7. And Eli was matching up and going after him. This is also at a group where Kayvon Thibodeau is coming off the line, destroying people. Nolan Smith is coming off the line, destroying people. Chris Steele is talking his noise, playing cornerback and wide receiver. I had such a good time at the Star in Frisco for the opening final. And Eli has been that guy ever since. Coming out of Mater Dei, ends up picking LSU. I was really looking forward to him on one side and my man Derek Stingley Jr. on the other. It wasn't to be. He has since transferred to Alabama, where he's going to want all the smoke that is Isaiah Nair, Xavier Worthy, maybe Jordan Addison, perhaps even a Bijan Robinson if they're bold enough to split him out, and of course, Jahleel Billingsley if they put him on the numbers. He wants that smoke. Now, he's got some work to do. Got himself in a little bit of trouble. Maybe it holds him up, maybe it doesn't. But they need somebody that can really fill that space that is left by Josh Jobe, because on the other side, Kool-Aid McKinstry was getting stirred, okay? I watched that boy get his grits cooked against Cincinnati, and it didn't look like it was too much better against Georgia and that wide receiving group. He might get picked on, especially if Eli turns out to be that dude on the outside. You might actually move a Malachi over there, right? Malachi Moore moves out there. I'd be fine with that too. What I'm saying is Eli's going to make you better. Going to let you move around. Might even play both sides, right? Might not just be a boundary of field dude. We'll see what happens. Okay. Next on the list for me, got to be Travis Dye at USC. I think he slept on because we know so much about the wide receiver group out there, and because not a lot of people were paying attention to Oregon after, they lost to Utah, such as it is. But he was outstanding for them. We had over 1,200 yards rushing, and I think he's going to be outstanding at USC if they get the offensive line situation figured out, which is a big if. Okay, now, back to Alabama, where I need to talk about my man Jahleel Billingsley one more again. There aren't that many tight ends that are great coming out of high school. So much so that you remember their names when they appear. 2020, right? It's Eric Gilbert, who I still think is going to be a monster. For him, Darnell Washington. For him, Austin Stogner. And then you got to go back to like O.J. Howard. Like, tight ends just kind of come out. Like, Mark Andrews was a wide receiver that they moved over to tight end. He wasn't a tight end when he got to Oklahoma. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Wide receivers usually come and move in, right? And then you'll basically get some found money every now and again if you go to Alabama or Georgia, where they seem to have the franchise on these dudes, which is kind of my point. So for Jahleel Billingsley to be the tight end that is the caliber of O.J. Howard is one thing. It is quite another for him to be returning kickoffs on a team where Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle exist, breathe air. Now, Jalen was injured for most of the 2020 season, but that don't mean you couldn't have dropped him back there in the national championship game when it mattered most. Devontae Smith won the Heisman Trophy at wide receiver and was returning kicks even a couple years before that. You still got Jahleel Billingsley back there running back the ball. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of a story that Coach Switzer likes to tell, right? About our man Keith Jackson. Keith Jackson was a tight end on a wishbone team, which is a glorified offensive lineman to everybody else. But he was so doggone talented and good that he used to beg Barry Switzer to let him return punts so he could touch the ball. And Barry gave in. And you know what? Keith was a man back there. A tight end returning punts. That is what Jahleel Billingsley reminds me of. I hope they let him return kicks out at Texas. I really do. I just want to see it. I want y'all to see 6'4", 240, running at you full speed with sub 4.5 speed. Like, I just that lights me up, right? And then you're going to have him matching up over linebackers? Good luck. All right. Moving from Jahleel to South Carolina tight end Austin Stogner. I think him and Jaheim going to be pretty good. You always got that connection with Spencer and Austin, and I think it's going to pay dividends in the SEC East. They outperformed my expectations last year under Shane Beamer. No reason why they couldn't do it again, especially when you're adding those two kinds of players there. Next on the list, going to Arkansas, wide receiver. That would be Jadon Haselwood. The reason I'm highlighting Haselwood here is because Treylon Burks, was drafted by the Tennessee Titans. Matter of fact, you felt so good about Treylon Burks out of Arkansas that you let A.J. Brown go to Philadelphia. Means something to me, okay? Jadon Haselwood was that dude coming out of high school. The way that we talk about Emeka Egbuka, the way that we talk about perhaps even, we didn't talk about Jackson Smith and Jigba the way that we talked about Emeka Egbuka or Julian Fleming. That's how we talked about Jadon Haselwood. So now it's just reaching his expectation, which is being the number one player at wide receiver in 2019 class. I expect him to fill that void left by Treylon Burks and be KJ Jefferson's favorite target on the outside. He has the talent to do that. And I think in that offense where they're going to try to run fast, go warp speed, and put the ball in their playmakers' hands, I expect Kendall Briles to figure it out and figure out really great opportunities for Jadon Haselwood to touch the ball all over the yard. Okay, from Jadon Haselwood, we move to another former Oklahoma wide receiver. That be USC wideout Mario Williams. Pretty doggone good with Caleb Williams, right? It was a great tandem, so much so that they want to keep playing with each other. I think they're going to have a great rapport, at least to start the season, then we'll see. But it's not as if USC lacks wide receivers. It's kind of why I was like, you going after Jordan Addison? Why don't you you need offensive linemen. You don't need more wide receivers. But again, if Jordan Addison wants to come play for you, you're not going to tell him no. And then last on the list, LSU defensive end Mekhi Wingo coming from Missouri, where he was outstanding. I expect him to be pretty doggone good in that defense, especially in Brian Kelly's first year where he wants to run the ball and play defense whenever possible, okay? All right, those are my slept-on candidates for most impactful transfer of 2022. Next week, we will complete this series with the super slept-on candidates for 2022, some dudes that you probably didn't even know or think about, but I will give you the 411 on what to expect from them. Thanks for watching this video, and remember, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any other videos on the #1 Ranked Show YouTube channel.